Hello, everyone. Mr. K here again, talking about brakes today. And this is the first of quite a few lessons on brakes because brakes are one of the most important things you're ever going to work on, obviously. Also, the ASE tests hit them very, very hard. So if you go take an ASE test on brakes, obviously you're going to get a lot of brakes questions. But if you go take an ASE test on, oh my gosh, even I think transmissions, electrical, electronics, it's going to be full of brake stuff, So we're going to hit it hard. Super important. Okay. So I'm going to start off with a video here just for fun. So go ahead and pause my video and watch this one this time. All right, you should have just watched that video. Just something kind of interesting I threw out there. Okay. A lot of different kind of brake systems, different parts. We're just going to start scratching the surface today and hopefully go in an order that makes sense. We're going to talk about the functions of brakes, basic terminology, what's a proportioning valve, and we're going to talk about ABS. First, let's talk about the function of brakes. First function of brakes is they convert mechanical energy into heat. Okay, mechanical into heat energy. Go ahead and watch this video at this time, and you'll see some heat being generated by brakes. Okay, should have just watched that video. Kind of neat. You can see that, see the heat coming right off the brakes, and you know that that friction from between the pads and the rotors just turns right into heat. Okay, if it's a hybrid car, you're converting mechanical energy into electricity. That's the second function of brakes. So there's two main types of brakes. Those are the two. That's an ASE test question, by the way. Brakes can be either convert rotational motion into convert friction into either heat or electricity. And of course, the end goal is to stop the car, right? Let's talk about terminology. Okay, a lot of different parts in brake systems. We're going to break it down. I think it's easiest to go in chronological order. So from probably about the 1960s and up, let's start there. You're going to get a brake system kind of like this. About 60s and 70s, you're going to get something like this. There's a brake pedal. There's a master cylinder that generates the pressure. So the brake pedal pushes a push rod, pushes into the master cylinder. That makes pressure for the lines and shoves that pressure through the lines, excuse me, and then it applies the brakes. Pretty simple, right? It worked. It didn't work all the time for every scenario, but it worked. Jump into the 70s through 90s, and all of a sudden they added something. Okay, so as I was saying, in the 70s to the 90s, all of a sudden they added something, and it was called a proportioning valve. Other names for it, similar items, would be a combination valve or a metering valve. We're going to talk about that in a different presentation more in depth, but for right now, let's just say it's a proportioning valve. We're talking about what that did in a few minutes here. So you jump from the 90s now, let's go 90s to now, and it's gotten crazy. Now we've added ABS, or anti-lock brakes, or anti-lock braking system. In an ABS system, you've got the same stuff we talked about earlier, but the proportioning valve is typically gone. Not always, but it's typically gone. And now we've got in its place hydraulic control unit, also called an ABS block or an ABS pump. And the pressure leaves that, goes down to the ABS pump, and then gets distributed to the wheels as the computer sees appropriate, because it's monitoring each wheel's speed with speed sensors. And it may have a toner ring or an encoder ring at each wheel speed sensor. Anyway, it gets crazy complicated. Okay, so there's the basic gist of a brake system. So let's talk about proportioning valve. What does it actually do? We're going to watch a video on this, but just to kind of prep you for that, here's what it looks like. Proportioning valve, see it's located usually pretty close to the master cylinder. It regulates the fluid flow from the front, between the front and the rear brakes. So in other words, it helps the rear brakes not lock up if you go into a skid, so that the back end doesn't swing around on the highway and skid and pass the front of your car. All right, go ahead and watch both of these videos at this time. And this one you only need to watch from 308 to 318. Okay, so hopefully you just watch those videos and I give you a little more of a background on a proportioning valve and you can see how that works, why that works. Okay. So my next question is there a proportioning valve in ABS brakes? Well, I think I said the answer earlier. Typically not, because the ABS replaces the need for that. Here's a good video about ABS. Go ahead and watch this video at this time. Okay, should have just watched that video. So common issues with an ABS system. Let's talk about that and how are you going to fix them. So a customer brings you a car, it's got the ABS light on. What are you thinking? What are you going to do? Well, first thing is I would plug in a scan tool and talk to that computer, right? That BCM, body control module, see what's going on. It's probably going to throw you a code like this, C0040, C0050, C0035, whatever. It's going to throw you probably a code like that. It's probably going to say ABS wheel speed sensor, left front or right front or something like that, fault. Okay. That's usually what flips the lights on. How are you going to fix it though? Let's talk about the common issues though. First, okay. First, in my experience, the most common reason why the ABS light kicks on is this: a dirty, chipped, whatever it may be, teeth missing encoder or toner ring. That's what they look like. Doesn't look like much, right? It's that guy right there, that kind of reddish, brown looking thing. And right there, that's got a chip in it. That's enough right there that would stop it from working correctly, okay? If that happens, you can't repair them, you got to replace it. Let's see what else we got here. Okay. It would be a dirty encoder ring. Okay, the encoder ring has little tiny magnets inside of it and it attracts road debris and looks like there's a little chip on that. That would be enough to cause a wheel speed sensor code because it wouldn't read it. This sensor wouldn't read it correctly anymore. Good news is you can just clean it with a Q-tip. In fact, that is such a common issue that if you go into ShopKey and tell it, ask for directions in the factory manual I just used a 2011 GMC for an example. If you ask ShopKey for directions on how to replace a wheel speed sensor, not troubleshoot, how to replace it, it actually yells at you and says, hold on a second. If you're replacing the wheel speed sensor due to a trouble code, make sure you check the encoder ring for metallic chips. So make sure you do that check first to make sure that it's not dirty. That's how common that problem is. And this I just threw up here because it's kind of neat. Shows the north and south poles of the magnets inside of here that actually cause the attraction of metal. Okay. Next most common thing I would argue. Let's think about it. Okay, your ABS wheel speed sensor is just hanging right out here in the open. There's your connector. You're driving down the road. It's going to get hit by salt, snow, slush, sticks if you go off-roading. You guessed it, a damaged or corroded wire. That's going to be probably your number 2 most common cause. Okay. So our old friend corrosion, remember that, right? When copper turns green, it's copper's version of rust. So it is corroded. Okay. And of course, look for the obvious. Just look for a broken wire, a damaged wire, damaged connector. Okay. And number 3, you could just have a bad wheel speed sensor. That happens relatively commonly. Okay. Could just have bad wheel speed sensor. That's typically what they look something like that. Okay, there's one installed, and you can see that's installed with a toner ring there set up. So that would be like a 90s or early 2000s Chevy system. And then the encoder ring that we looked at a few minutes ago on here would be like maybe '08 and newer, which it's a long story why they changed designs. We can talk about that later. Okay. So there you go. At this point in time, you should have all the information to complete your assignment on brakes part 1. And have a good day.